What's going on, guys? This is Lior and welcome back to my channel. What I thought I would do in this video is talk about the key differences that you have to know as a developer within your own market about how to make strategic decisions, right? Because, development, I think, is super hyper local, and not only hyper local, but very niche, right? You as the developer, builder, whatever you are, right? We need to figure out how to make decisions about how we're finishing different types of products. So I'll talk about the different types of projects I undertake and how I think about the differences between them and the product I am delivering. So let's get at it. So to start this video off, what I thought I would first do is talk about some of the segments that I personally play in. Again, I think, as a developer, like I said, you have to choose these segments that you are good at, that you are tackling, right? So for me personally, what we do in my company is, if you guys have seen my channel, what we do is we do luxury apartments, right? So we do a lot of gut renovations and even new construction that we rent out. We do a lot of luxury condos, right? So this is actually a condo project I just finished up. It's on the market, last unit in this building, but we do a lot of the condo projects. We also do townhouse projects, right, which I kind of consider a step above. And then we also do super high-end luxury single families, right? So price points, condos typically were under $1 million. Townhouses are like $1 million to $2 million, give or take. And then, our single families tend to be $2.5, $3 million to about $4 million, right? So there are different segments, and within each segment, I have to know exactly the type of product I'm gonna deliver. So let's start first with the interiors, right? So if we're doing, for example, apartment projects, right? I know where I need to spend money and I know where I can cut money, right? For example, our cabinet package is not necessarily gonna be as nice as these, right? These are custom slab cabinetry. These are pretty expensive cabinets, right? If I'm gonna do apartment projects for rent, we typically opt for cheaper cabinets, right? Because again, you're just not getting that extra rent bump for putting nicer cabinets in. There's a lot of also lighting details that we're not necessarily gonna do in apartments, right? Here we have underlighting cabinet. You can actually see we also have toe kick lighting here. In condos, we certainly will do that. And then of course, townhouse and of course, single family projects, we're also gonna have lighting details. But as we take this next step up, right, in our townhouse and single family projects, for example, we'll add even more detail, right? Because again, we're playing in different price points and I know what I need to add in order to really be competitive in those price points, right? So for example, in condos, a stainless steel package is beautiful and it works really nicely. But if we're doing a $3 or $4 million single family, we can't do a 36-inch fridge and a 30-inch range. It's just not gonna work. We're gonna have to go, much bigger fridge freezer. We're typically gonna panel them. We're gonna panel the your dishwasher. Even the range, right, is gonna typically be at least a 36-inch range. We're gonna have other details like pot fillers, right? And all of those decisions come from understanding our target market, right? So I know in the sub $1 million space, for example, that this package actually is really, really nice and still stands out versus a lot of the competition, right? Because my competition is doing a lot of, stuff that I would do in apartments. But if I am gonna be developing a $2 million townhouse, again, I have to know based on, competition, what I have to deliver, right? And a lot of it is, I can look up on comps and I can look up other projects that have sold to see what they do, but a lot of it does come from specific market knowledge, right? Like, having been playing in these markets for the last 6, 7, 8 years, I kind of have a feeling of, I know what I need to add in here to this specific project or this specific project to kind of make it more stand out. Now, even though I talked a lot about interior decisions, a lot of these decisions actually start out from the very beginning, right? We first started thinking about this from even the siding, right? With siding, if I'm doing a condo project versus a super custom, $4 million single family, I'm gonna think about maybe spending, doing a stock color for siding on one project, whereas maybe I'm gonna do something super custom on the $4 million or $3 million project, right? Right now we're building a $3 million single family and we're going with very custom siding colors. We're gonna have different cedars in place, right? To really make that stand out. Whereas obviously a project, where my units are selling for, $600,000, $700,000, that sort of project just can't absorb that cost. Same thing with the window packages, right? I mean, again, this is a condo project. Here I opted to use a black Anderson package, which is really, really good for this price point. That's exactly what's needed. And it's still, Anderson is obviously still a great brand, but when I'm gonna be building a $4 million home, for example, right, we're probably gonna opt with Pella, which is a little bit of a higher tier. Our windows are gonna be actually a little bit larger. So we're gonna spend quite a bit more money, but again, that's because we know that that kind of product commands the sorts of materials that we need to use in them. And finally, these decisions stem all the way down to the smallest finished details, including tile, right? So for example, I'm in the primary suite here, right? Again, in a condo project, I'm probably gonna keep my tile budget a little bit tighter. Usually I'm looking at tiles around $3 to $6 per square foot. When I'm doing apartments, for example, again, I know that's where I can cut and still deliver a really nice product. I'm usually probably looking at $2 to $3 per square foot, nothing crazy. But again, when I go to the super high-end stuff and I'm doing my larger townhomes, I'm doing my single families, that's kind of when I really start opening the waterworks, right? Because again, I know I have to deliver something much more special, much more unique. So in those projects, we're looking at, $6 to $12 per square foot, maybe even a little bit more for super custom and very specific tile that we want to add in. So again, it all comes back to specific expertise, right? I know exactly what I need to deliver within each of my different segments of projects. So again, the key point I think for any sort of developer or anyone doing any sort of project is really, really narrowing down your expertise and your niches, right? If I were to go to a completely different market or a different city outside of Boston, I wouldn't necessarily have that expertise where I could differentiate between what sort of finish do I need in my condos versus what sort of finish do I need in my townhouses, right? You could certainly study them up and you can certainly look at different comps and different projects and start to get a feel. But then there's, that's kind of what I would say the more hard facts. But then there's also a lot of gut feeling on these projects, right? Because again, I've been operating these markets for years and years. From here, right? I've been looking at homes here forever. So I can kind of make an intuition based on all my experience here. And, if I don't have an exact comp for something, I can kind of get a pretty good feeling of, is this something where I need to spend money on? What kind of finish or what kind of feature do I really need to throw in here? And that's what it comes down to, right? A lot of this is, again, super, super specific expertise. That's why I don't do anything outside of those projects that I mentioned out here, right? Like I've been pitched on doing different types of, commercial projects or anything like that. And again, it's not something that I have a niche and expertise in, and I wouldn't be able to deliver something as good, right? So stick to your expertise, stick to your niches. As a developer, you want to deliver exactly the type of product that better than anyone else. So hopefully that's helpful, guys. Hopefully that kind of gives you a little insight into how we think when we're doing our different types of projects. Again, whether it's luxury apartments, condos, super high-end single families, right? There's different thought processes that go in them, but they're all super, super critical so you can deliver each and single project.